The first time honey touches the tongue, something ancient wakes up. Long before language, before agriculture, the human body learned to recognize this substance as both food and signal. Sweetness here is not just pleasure, it is information. Glucose and fructose slip past taste buds and into the bloodstream, and the brain responds with a quiet recalibration. Insulin rises, not in alarm, but in conversation. Compared to refined sugar, honey enters more slowly, buffered by enzymes, organic acids, and trace compounds that nudge metabolism rather than shove it. The body doesn't brace for impact, it listens. When honey enters the mouth, the body does not experience it as a simple indulgence but as a meaningful signal shaped by millions of years of coevolution with natural food sources. Sweetness is often dismissed as a craving or a weakness, yet biologically it represents a language the nervous system understands instantly. Taste receptors on the tongue send messages to the brain that reach far beyond pleasure, preparing metabolic pathways for what is coming next. With honey, this preparation is measured rather than defensive, because its sugars arrive wrapped in complexity. Glucose and fructose are present, but they are accompanied by water, enzymes, organic acids, and trace minerals that slow their absorption and soften their impact. The body senses this difference almost immediately. As honey moves from the mouth into the bloodstream, insulin is released not as an emergency response, but as a coordinated adjustment. Refined sugars tend to provoke sharp spikes that force the pancreas to act quickly and aggressively, creating cycles of excess and depletion. Honey, by contrast, encourages a more gradual rise in blood glucose, allowing cells to absorb energy without being flooded. This steadier response reduces metabolic stress, preserving insulin sensitivity and supporting long-term glucose regulation. Over time, this matters deeply, because metabolic health is not defined by single moments but by patterns repeated quietly every day. What makes honey especially interesting is that it does not behave like an isolated nutrient. It functions more like a biological message, reminding the body how food once arrived in nature. Enzymes present in honey begin breaking down sugars even before digestion truly starts, reducing the workload on the gut and the pancreas. This early assistance subtly alters the metabolic conversation, shifting it from urgency to efficiency. The body is not forced to compensate for an artificial overload, it is allowed to participate in a familiar rhythm. The brain, too, responds differently. Because glucose enters circulation at a moderated pace, neural energy supply becomes more stable. This can influence focus, mood, and perceived energy levels, reducing the mental fog or irritability that often follows rapid sugar crashes. In this way, honey's sweetness carries cognitive implications, shaping how the brain experiences nourishment and reward. Rather than reinforcing cycles of craving, it can support a calmer relationship with energy intake. At a deeper level, honey challenges the modern idea that all sugars are metabolically equal. The body does not interpret nutrients solely by their chemical formula, but by their context. Structure, timing, and accompanying compounds all influence how a substance is processed. Honey demonstrates that sweetness does not have to mean metabolic chaos. When sugars arrive as part of a complex natural matrix, the body recognizes them as compatible rather than threatening. This recognition reveals something fundamental about human physiology. The body evolved not to battle food, but to collaborate with it. When nourishment aligns with biological expectations, regulatory systems relax into efficiency. Honey, in this sense, becomes less about sweetness and more about trust between the body and what it consumes, a reminder that health often emerges not from restriction, but from alignment with patterns the body already knows. When honey reaches the digestive system, it does not arrive as an inert mass of calories waiting to be dismantled, but as an active participant in the digestive process itself. Unlike highly processed foods that demand immediate and often forceful intervention from the gut, honey carries with it enzymes that have already begun the work of transformation. Amylase, invertase, and other naturally occurring enzymes initiate the breakdown of complex sugars into simpler forms, reducing the metabolic effort required from the stomach and small intestine. This early cooperation allows digestion to unfold with less friction, creating a sense of metabolic ease that is rarely noticed but deeply influential over time. As honey passes into the gut, its role becomes even more nuanced. The digestive tract is not merely a tube for nutrient extraction. It is a living ecosystem inhabited by trillions of microorganisms that shape immunity, metabolism, and even mood. Honey feeds this ecosystem selectively. Its complex sugars and oligosaccharides act as prebiotics, nourishing beneficial bacteria while offering little advantage to harmful strains. This subtle favoritism encourages microbial diversity and stability, which in turn strengthens the intestinal barrier and improves nutrient absorption. Digestion, in this context, becomes less about breakdown and more about balance. The presence of honey can also influence how the gut responds to irritation and stress. Its natural antimicrobial compounds do not attempt to sterilize the digestive tract, which would be both impossible and harmful. Instead, they help regulate microbial populations, keeping opportunistic organisms in check without disrupting beneficial communities. This moderation reduces low-grade inflammation in the gut lining, an issue increasingly linked to modern dietary patterns. When the intestinal environment is calmer, the body spends less energy on defense and more on repair and regulation. Honey's texture and composition further support digestive comfort. Its viscosity slows gastric emptying slightly, allowing nutrients to be absorbed at a steadier pace. This can ease bloating and discomfort, particularly in individuals sensitive to rapid fermentation caused by refined sugars. The gut is given time to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Over repeated exposure, this slower rhythm trains the digestive system to operate with greater efficiency and resilience. There is also an important neurological dimension to digestion that honey gently supports. The gut and brain communicate constantly through neural and chemical signals, forming what is often called the gut-brain axis. When digestion is smooth and inflammation is low, these signals become clearer and less chaotic. This can influence appetite regulation, stress response, and emotional stability. In this way, honey's effect on digestion extends beyond the physical act of nutrient processing into the realm of perception and well-being. What emerges from this process is a reminder that digestion is not meant to be a battlefield. The body thrives when food arrives in forms it recognizes and understands. Honey reflects a nutritional pattern shaped by nature rather than industry, offering complexity where the body expects it. Through enzyme support, microbial nourishment, and gentle regulation, honey transforms digestion into a cooperative experience, reinforcing the idea that the healthiest systems are not those that work the hardest, but those that work in harmony. Inside the body, damage rarely announces itself in dramatic ways. It accumulates quietly, at the level of molecules, where unstable compounds known as free radicals collide with cells and slowly erode their structure. This process, called oxidative stress, is not inherently harmful. It is a natural byproduct of breathing, metabolism, and immune activity. Problems arise when this process exceeds the body's capacity to regulate it. Honey enters this landscape not as a cure, but as a steady influence, contributing compounds that help restore equilibrium. Its antioxidants do not eliminate free radicals entirely, because the body still needs them, but they soften their excess, allowing cellular systems to function with less strain. The antioxidant compounds in honey, including various phenolic acids and flavonoids, operate at a microscopic scale. They donate electrons to unstable molecules, reducing their reactivity and preventing chain reactions that damage cell membranes, proteins, and DNA. This work is subtle and continuous rather than immediate and dramatic. Unlike synthetic antioxidants delivered in isolation, those found in honey arrive embedded in a natural matrix, interacting with other compounds in ways that enhance their effectiveness. The body seems to respond more intelligently to this complexity, integrating these substances into its existing defense systems. Over time, this reduction in oxidative pressure can influence inflammation. Many inflammatory processes begin as protective responses but become harmful when they persist unnecessarily. Oxidative stress often acts as a trigger that keeps these responses active longer than needed. By easing this underlying stress, honey may help calm chronic, low-grade inflammation that does not cause acute pain but gradually undermines tissue health. Blood vessels, joints, and connective tissues benefit from this quieter environment, where repair can keep pace with wear. At the cellular level, mitochondria, the structures responsible for energy production, are especially sensitive to oxidative damage. When their membranes are compromised, energy efficiency declines, leading to fatigue and metabolic imbalance. The antioxidant support associated with honey helps protect these delicate systems, allowing cells to produce energy with fewer losses. This preservation of cellular efficiency has cascading effects, influencing muscle function, cognitive clarity, and overall vitality. Energy, in this sense, becomes not just a matter of intake, but of protection. There is also an evolutionary perspective worth considering. Human physiology evolved in the presence of plant-derived antioxidants, not purified compounds isolated in laboratories. Honey represents a concentrated expression of this ancestral exposure, gathering phytochemicals from diverse floral sources into a single substance. When consumed, it reintroduces a spectrum of protective molecules the body recognizes and can utilize effectively. This familiarity may explain why natural antioxidants often perform differently than their synthetic counterparts. Ultimately, honey's contribution to cellular protection is not about preventing aging or eliminating damage altogether. It is about reducing unnecessary friction within biological systems. By supporting the body's own regulatory mechanisms, honey helps create conditions where repair is possible and resilience is strengthened. Health, at this level, is not defined by the absence of stress, but by the capacity to absorb it without losing integrity, a process quietly supported when nourishment includes substances that work with the body rather than against it. Energy in the human body is rarely about how much fuel is available and more about how that fuel is delivered. The way energy arrives shapes how it is used, stored, or lost. When refined sugars enter the system, they often do so abruptly, flooding the bloodstream and forcing rapid hormonal responses that create a brief surge followed by an equally rapid decline. Honey behaves differently. Its blend of glucose and fructose enters circulation at varied speeds, creating a smoother rise in blood sugar that supports endurance rather than excess. This moderated delivery allows the body to remain in control, adjusting gradually instead of reacting defensively. As glucose from honey becomes available, muscles draw on it efficiently, especially during sustained activity. Rather than being overwhelmed with more energy than they can immediately use, muscle cells receive a steady supply that supports ongoing contraction and recovery. Fructose, processed primarily by the liver, follows a complementary path. Instead of sharply raising blood sugar, it is converted into glycogen, a stored form of energy that can be accessed later. This dual pathway reduces metabolic competition and helps the body manage energy across time rather than in isolated bursts. The liver plays a central role in this process, acting as a regulator rather than a storage dump. When energy arrives gradually, the liver can replenish glycogen stores without converting excess sugar into fat. This distinction matters because long-term metabolic health depends on how efficiently the body handles surplus energy. Honey's natural composition supports this efficiency, encouraging storage when appropriate and release when needed. The result is a system that feels less strained and more adaptable to changing demands. The nervous system also responds to this steadier energy flow. The brain relies almost entirely on glucose, and fluctuations in its availability can influence mood, focus, and perceived fatigue. When blood sugar rises and falls sharply, cognitive performance often follows the same pattern. Honey's slower energy curve supports mental clarity by reducing these swings. Instead of brief alertness followed by irritability or exhaustion, the brain experiences a more consistent supply, allowing attention and emotional regulation to stabilize. Over time, repeated exposure to smoother energy patterns can reshape how the body interprets hunger and fatigue signals. Sudden crashes often provoke cravings, pushing individuals toward quick fixes that perpetuate the cycle of spikes and drops. When energy is delivered more evenly, appetite cues become clearer and less urgent. The body learns that fuel is reliable, reducing the impulse to overconsume. This shift is subtle but powerful, influencing eating behavior without conscious restriction. What emerges from this process is a different relationship with energy itself. Rather than chasing stimulation, the body settles into sustainability. Honey does not create endless vitality, but it supports a form of energy that aligns with human physiology. It reinforces the idea that endurance is more valuable than intensity, and that balance often outperforms excess. In this way, sustained energy becomes not just a metabolic outcome, but a lesson in how the body thrives when nourishment respects its natural rhythms. The immune system is often imagined as a battlefield, a relentless force designed to destroy anything unfamiliar. In reality, it functions more like a system of judgment, constantly assessing what should be challenged and what should be tolerated. Honey interacts with this system in a way that emphasizes balance rather than aggression. Its antimicrobial properties do not overwhelm the body's defenses or attempt to eliminate microbes indiscriminately. Instead, they introduce a subtle pressure that discourages harmful organisms while allowing beneficial ones to remain part of the internal ecosystem. This selectivity matters because immune health depends not on sterility, but on discernment. When honey comes into contact with tissues exposed to the external environment, such as the mouth, throat, and upper digestive tract, its effects become especially apparent. Natural compounds within honey create conditions that make it difficult for certain pathogens to thrive, without triggering strong inflammatory responses. This gentle modulation reduces the likelihood of prolonged irritation, which can otherwise keep immune cells in a state of constant activation. Over time, this reduced baseline inflammation allows immune resources to be allocated more efficiently, responding to genuine threats rather than reacting to every minor disturbance. Inside the gut, where much of the immune system is stationed, honey's influence continues in a quieter form. By supporting beneficial bacteria, honey indirectly strengthens immune function. These microorganisms help train immune cells, teaching them how to distinguish between harmless substances and potential dangers. When microbial balance is stable, immune signaling becomes clearer and less chaotic. This clarity reduces the risk of overreaction, a state increasingly linked to allergies, sensitivities, and autoimmune patterns. Honey contributes not by commanding the immune system, but by improving the environment in which it learns and operates. There is also an energetic dimension to immune resilience. Chronic immune activation is metabolically expensive, diverting energy away from growth, repair, and cognition. When the immune system is constantly on high alert, fatigue becomes a common companion. Honey's ability to ease low-grade inflammation and support steady energy availability helps reduce this unnecessary drain. The immune system, no longer forced into constant vigilance, can shift into a more responsive and less reactive mode. From an evolutionary perspective, this interaction makes sense. Humans did not evolve alongside sterile foods or isolated nutrients, but with substances that carried both nourishment and microbial signals. Honey represents one of these complex foods, shaped by environmental exposure and biological processing. Its interaction with the immune system reflects this history, reinforcing tolerance where appropriate and resistance where necessary. The body seems to recognize this complexity and respond with a form of intelligence that cannot be replicated through simplification. Ultimately, immune resilience is not about constant defense, but about adaptability. Honey supports this adaptability by reducing noise within the immune system, allowing signals to be interpreted accurately. Health, in this context, becomes less about fighting and more about listening, less about force and more about balance. When the immune system is supported in this way, it does not become weaker, but wiser, capable of protecting the body without exhausting it in the process.